We are doing our souls, messing with our souls, something we just don't talk about much. And so we're kind of bringing them out in the closet, and we're talking about it because that's a very important part of who we are. We are people who's created from God. God made us as souls, and God's constantly communicating to us and giving us comfort and all the things that we need to not only just survive, but to excel in this life and continue to be the things that God needs us to be in the world. And that's how we find a lot of our fulfillment for what we do in this life. I mean, you can only work so many hours a day, and you only chase kids so many times a week, and you can only do the things everybody asks you to do. But here is God who says, I've got a great plan for you, and if you pay attention to me, I'll lead you to that plan, and you're going to find some things about yourself you never really understood. But you're going to think, wow, that was pretty special. And so when you gather together worship like we are today, then it becomes the highlight of our week. And so that's kind of where we're trying to move ourselves. And so we're going to go back a few years. I don't know, like 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. Remember those days? Back when Danny Bruce was a pup. And so we have a guy that was close friends with Danny. His name was Moses. And Moses' responsibility, if you remember the old stories, was to bring these slaves out of Egypt. God hears their cries. And so God speaks to Moses. And Moses says, like we all say, no, we're not doing that. But God continues to, and eventually he goes. God speaks to Moses, and Moses responds by then going to the Pharaoh and then taking the people out of the wilderness to a land that had been promised to them. But it doesn't happen overnight. How many overnights does it take? Anybody remember the story? About 40 years. Now, if you walked that track, you and I, if we were in Egypt and we walked all the way to the land that they occupy today, it would probably take us, if we took our time, 2-3 weeks. But it took them 40 years. And it wasn't because Moses never asked for directions, right? There was something else that was going on that was far more powerful than that. You know what it is? It's called transformation. We use that word a lot in church, don't we? You take people where they are, and you work the heck out of them until they become the person that God needs us to be, or our true identity. When we're born a certain way that God had designed us to live, but when we start to get older, we get smarter than God, and we want to do our own thing. And so then at some point in our lives, we're going to go, well, I got to go back to being what God needs me to be. That process is just transformation. And so here it took 40 years to take these people out of slavery into God's people, from being what the Pharaoh demanded that they be to being what God needs them to be, out of slavery and into being a servant. It's kind of a weird thing, isn't it? Out of somebody's control into being the vessels of God's choosing. So now they've spent 40 years, and in this wilderness, there's just the way it is. There's some people that had to be born in the wilderness, so they had no idea of what it meant to live as slaves. And there were those who were so entrenched on being slaves that they had to die too. So if you can't take slaves and put them in the land of free automatically, and they become, oh, look at us, aren't we neat? They just become the way that they've always been. And so a transformation needed to take place in the lives of these people. And so here was Moses taking them, working with them for 40 years. Was it easy? Piece of cake, right? Right. If you like complaining, griping, moaning, and talking about the way things used to be, it was a piece of cake. And so here they were at the land that they were in, looking across the Red River into Texas, into the Promised Land. And there they are, and Moses is taking a deep sigh because he is about to deliver them into the land that was flowing with milk and honey. It's a desert, but it sounds better, right? And so before he goes there, he has to share some last instructions. So he's standing at the Promised Land, looking back at his people, and I guarantee you this, there was a lot of anxiety. He had worked 40 years with these people, trying to get them to go into somewhere that he can no longer go into. He was going to stay and be left behind while they went and started a whole new chapter of their life, the first generation of God's people. And so you know how much anxiety that was. And so he talks to the people again. And these are just some of the words that he says. You're the fickle people. I'm Moses. I like that role. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. And you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your might. And keep these words that I have commanded you today in your heart. I want you to recite them to your children and talk about them when you are at home and when you are away and when you lie down and when you rise up. Bind them as a sign on your hands. Fix them as emblems on your forehead. Write them down on the doorpost of your house and of your gates. Hear the words of desperation. Here is the reading. Hey, Tim. Man, they do good stuff. Hey, I want you to look behind you. There's a guy back there in the white shirt. You see him? Stand up, Tim. See him? Yeah, I'm going to tell you a little secret about Tim. Just the good stuff, Tim. Yeah, you can sit down. My life is, kind of well documented, and there were certain people in my high school youth group that kept me alive, okay? Literally. And they helped me dust me off, and then for some reason, they pointed me in the direction of college. I couldn't even spell it. We'll talk about that later. And then I got to TCU, for whatever reason. They didn't reject me. And then I got there, and there was a group of people, a group of guys that kept me steering in the direction of ministry. All these guys are business majors. That's all I hung out with, was guys who are doing business and other things like that. And a lot of times I go, I'm not going this ministry thing. I'm a knucklehead, and they don't put knuckleheads in ministry. And so it was guys, and Tim back there is one of my buddies. I hadn't seen him in, how many years, Tim? Thank you, Tim. Thank you for that. Thank you for that number. It's been a long time. We graduated together in 85. He was so desperate to get out of there, he took 24 hours, your final semester. That's the way he is. He can talk to people and do anything. So he talked to his advisor and all the professors that let him take 24 hours. And he made a 3.5 that semester, if I remember. Then he graduated with us, and then he went off to do some crazy stuff, and he has a crazy family with him. And they just like to do a lot of adventures. But Tim was our leader of our group, and so he's always really near and dear. I'm trying to say this without crying. So anyway, Tim is here. So have you ever heard me say, hey, y'all drive fast and take lots of chances? You ever hear me say that? Tim he always said that to us, so that's where we always got it from. So anyway, he leaves today to go back to Connecticut. That's where he's from. So another story. So don't talk to him too much at the end of the service. He has to go to the airport. That's what it is. Well, we're continuing on with our conversation about our souls and who we are as a people of God. And when we were reading that little text that we read out of Deuteronomy and hearing Moses say those words, I read this thing about at least 100 times throughout my years, and it's one of my favorite texts on here. And because the word that comes to my mind when I read this is the word desperation. Here is Moses about to, these are his people, man. I mean, he spent 40 years. I mean, y'all dealt with me for 22 years. Can you imagine doing another 18? No. No, you can't. And so for 40 years, they were doing all this stuff together, and he's about to set them off. And, man, you kids go get them, and he's got to stay and let them go and do their thing. But being a parent now, the way I kind of visualize this exchange taking place with them is not too unfamiliar to me, because it's kind of what we go through as parents when we send our kids off to college, right? Anybody do that? You load up the station wagon. Am I dating myself? And you go off into college, and then you set them up, you know, when one or both of you guys are crying at this point because little baby's going off to college. You know, there's two sides, right? Kind of, yeah, but then like, I don't know if they're going to do this, if they're going to be able to do the things that they need to do. So they're about to send off, you get them all set up, you get in your car, and you're trying to leave, but you know there's always one more thing of advice, right? There's one more thing you want to make sure and instill in them. And so we say it. Hey, don't forget to set your alarm. I'm not going to be around to wake you up in the morning, right? Don't go around eating all that junk food all the time. Be sure and eat some vegetables and some protein. Get as much sleep as you can, because sleep in college is going to make you you need that. It's very important to you, but don't sleep till 2 in the afternoon and miss all your classes. Get with it. Do everything you do. Take care of your studies. If you get in a bind, go talk to your professor. Iron all these things out. It's up to you to make the difference. We parents, we know, we absolutely know that if they forget the very basic things, that they will make college life much harder than it has to be. Right? So it is with our faith life. So it is. Our faith life is so difficult as it is. Knowing what in the world this God that we cannot see with our eyes or hear with our ears, trying to understand this is so difficult. But if we do not do the very basic things, like caring for our souls where God communicates to us, then we're going to make this life a whole lot harder than it has to be. Moses tells these folks, do not forget who you are. Because you're going to go in, and you're going to get caught up in all of these things that are taking place around you. All the excitement, all the great possibilities, all these ideas are going to be flooding your mind. Your new adventure is going to be remarkable. And then you'll just slowly engage in that. Then you'll start to slowly change until you don't even know that you're changing, and you don't even know who you are anymore. So don't forget the basic things about yourself. Keep the words of God in your heart. If you have children, recite those words to your kids. Don't forget to talk to your kids about God when you're at home. Don't forget to talk to your kids about God or pray with them when you're away on vacation. And when you lie down. Even when you rise up. Don't forget. Bind them in some form or fashion as a sign on your hand, a reminder of who you are. Heck, put them on your forehead, whatever it takes. Put them on your doorposts, put them on your gates, put them on everywhere you need to know, so people pass by, they know who you are and who you belong to. And every time you pass by, you're reminded, oh yes, I am a child of God. Do not forget who you are. Moses is dramatic to me in this situation, and for very good reason. Because we get so caught up, so lost in this vastness of all these other things that surround our lives, that we forget who we are. We forget what we do. We forget who we belong to. We forget what we're created by a loving God to do. And it's so easy. It's so easy, people, to forget that we are born of God. That we are souls that God has launched into this earth in this vessel we call a body, whose primary purpose is to continue to do the very things that God desires for our lives to be, and we do that to the best of our ability until we reach that point where we're just tired and we turn back to the one who created us. It is so incredibly easy to forget this. In fact, some of the most frustrating things I have to deal with on a weekly basis is to work with churches and church leaders and denominational leaders who forgot their purpose, who don't know what they're doing. It's frustrating. Frustrating. I'm going to tell you something that you already know. There's a lot of things I don't know. That was it. That was it. That's not rocket science, is it? There's just a whole lot of things I don't know about, right? You know that, right? I mean, my gosh, the 5th grade was the longest 2 years of my life. Okay? You understand that. But there are some things I do know through my experiences, and this is one of the things I do know. Apathy in faith. Being passive in the things of God. Being nonchalant with our role as God's ambassadors in the world. Being non-committed or warm or lukewarm, as Revelation says. Being nonchalant with church life. When we begin to think that church membership is the end goal for Christians, these things are not what God had in mind for your life or for the life of churches. If it was, then Jesus just wasted his time and his very life just so that the church can be just one more option on Sundays. But as it is, God, Jesus, gave you a spirit who gathers you together to do the very things that God needs to have done in this world. That comes from you. When God needs things to happen, like here's the people crying, God sends folks. Who does God send? God sends you. God sends me. God sends us. To be what God needs us to be to people who need to be shared and loved and hoped. And our commitment to Christ is also a commitment to our souls. To listen to the voice of God and learn how to understand God's voice and direction for our lives so that we can be useful for God. Bad souls, we're of no use. We're wasting space. Last week, we talked about 5 ways that we can distance ourselves from God. Kind of a cynical look, a little bit. If you want to know what it means to be a church member and stay distant from God, do these 5 things and do them very well. Today, we're just going to look at 4 things that we need to do in order to kind of build our relationship with God, how to grow in our faith, how to challenge ourselves to be the things that God needs us to be. And so we're going to look at those 4 things, but I'm going to tell you this. The first thing on this list is the most critical part of our faith journey. If you get this, then you'll be able to get the others. If you do not get this, then the others will mean nothing to you, and you'll just say, I can't do that. But this first one is what creates a desire within us. And the other 3 are going to be hard. Very hard, regardless. So hard we're going to say, I don't know if I can do that. But we have that desire that's already established in us. Then we begin to say, I'm going to go ahead and trust Jesus on this one, that he may know more than I do. You follow me? The first one is this. And these are words, instructions from Jesus, by the way. Seek first God's kingdom. Seek first God's righteousness. Seek what is right in the eyes of God. Do what is right by God. Then all the other things will be added. We kind of get that backwards. We want all the other things and tag God along to support us. But seek God first, God's kingdom. You know, there's no way around this. There's no other way we can do this. You're going to have to want to grow in God. We're going to have to want to know your purpose in life, why you were born, why you created, what is God trying to use you to do. You're going to have to desire to be confident in who you are as a child of God. And you're going to have to accept the challenges that God is going to place before you. One of the things I see played out more than anything else in my ministry is this type of scenario. There are so many people who struggle with life, and we really wish that we could have the benefits of being in a relationship with God without being in a relationship with God. You know what I mean by that? In economics, we call that welfare, right? I want to be able to get a check. I just don't want to go to work. I want somebody to take care of me. I just don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. Spiritual welfare is the same thing. We want the benefits of being in a relationship with God, but we don't want the effort, the commitment to be in that relationship. And we can't understand who this God is just simply because we don't know who this God is. So the question is, how do you change that? There's an old saying that I remember a long time ago that goes like this: give God the first of your day. Give God the first of your week. Give God the first tenth of your check. And see if that doesn't make a difference in your life at the end of the year. It doesn't mean these are rules and laws that you have to abide by and follow. It means we're trying to establish a different relationship with the things of this world by being in the very presence of God and opening ourselves up to God. Because the thing is, if you really want to be in communion with the church and communion with God and be a part of the church, there's three things you should be doing and should be doing well. The first thing is that you should be worshiping. Worshiping like this is your best day, your best moment of your life, right here, right now. It doesn't get any better than this. This is what sets you up for the rest of the week, even for every single day to follow. Worship as if this is the best day of your life. And believe it. Look forward to being in the very presence of God. Don't give excuses not to be here, not to do the things that you know you should be doing. Put God first in that instance. The second thing to do is put yourself in a discipleship group, because discipleship group talks a lot about the elements of our faith that we need to grow and develop. We talk about, we discuss it, we analyze it, we share our experiences, we hear other people's experiences, and we're not alone. We're in this journey together, and no one wants to go to Sunday school because nobody knows the Bible, so nobody knows the Bible, so nobody goes to class, so nobody ever knows the Bible. But you're in a group of people that knows nothing, but they try. And that's the whole point of discipleship. We're trying to learn and grow and develop our faith to be stronger, better than we've ever been before. We're going to move in the direction that God needs us to go, and we have a people that have our backs and are doing that with us. The third thing to do is find a ministry that is designed specifically for you. It's a ministry that God has gifted you with, and it's trying to equip you to go do great things with the people of God. Find a ministry that has your name in it, and go out and share that with other people, because God specifically is calling you to a task. Put God first and see if this doesn't change your life. Because without that foundation of constantly understanding God in your life, wherever you are and whatever you do, the rest of these soul builders just aren't possible. Because it can feel so unnatural that you're just going to quit doing it. What am I referring to? Number two. Not 7 times, but I tell you 7 times, 70 times. A lot of times. What's this referring to? Anybody? Forgiveness. I think it's Peter's having a conversation with Jesus, you know. I think the law, I'm not sure about this, so don't quote me on it. It talks about you have to forgive your neighbor a certain amount of times, and Peter chimes up, says, I can do it 7 times. Do I get a gold star? And then Jesus said what? I'll give you hints behind me. Second one. Yeah. So what do you think he's doing? He's pulling out his calculator, right? And he's trying to do the math. How many times do I have to do this in order to get that gold star that I'm really looking for in my crown? But the point is what? Forgiveness is not an option for us. It's a responsibility. And I know a lot of the things that we go through in this life, there's people who have hurt us so poorly, so badly, that we don't want to reconcile. We would just soon knock them out of our lives and never see them or hear from them again. Yeah. Is that right? We are people of reconciliation. If you heard of this Jesus fella, he did a lot of things for us. And that's who we are. That is what we do. And what keeps us from forgiving is probably a lot of selfishness. And I'm trying to think, okay, what keeps me from forgiving Dan all the time? And he just does things all the time. All right? Times 100. And that's just during the week. But what is it? I think a lot of it has to do with our pride, right? We want to always keep that upper hand on others. We just want to hold on to things. We want to win the battle of egos, as me versus Dan. It's about losing control of a relationship, and I don't want to lose control. As long as I don't forgive, I got control over that dude. Or maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's just fear. If I forgive that person, you know what? They're just going to do it again. They got to learn a lesson. And if I do it again, then I'm going to get hurt again. And so it just kind of builds itself up. It just keeps going and going. Forgiving others releases those fears. It gets rid of all that garbage, that resentment, that anger we carry up in our necks and our muscles in our necks. It just lets us be free from all that. It says, I'm not going to allow my anger and your baggage to control what I do. I'm going to forgive you. I'm going to move on with my life. It releases a lot of that stuff. And that's a hard thing to do. But if you don't have that trust in this person, Jesus says, this is what you need to do, then a lot of times we hold on to it because we don't feel like it. And when you don't feel like forgiving, that is when you need to do it. Number 3. Did I tell you there's 4? See the speck of dust in your neighbor's eye and ignoring the log in your own eye. You know what this is referring to? This statement came on the heels of when Jesus was saying this, most of the Sermon on the Mount stuff, of his command, do not judge others or you'll be judged. You heard that? That's something for some reason churches and Christians kind of ignore. I don't get that one. Okay, so judging others and gossiping. You know what they are? They're faith killers. Gossiping and judging people are church killers. Isn't that why people don't want to go to church? I'll be around those always judging me about something. Always telling me what I'm doing wrong. Telling about all my sins. Doing all this stuff. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go do that. They're faith killers. They're church killers. They're soul killers. And it's absolutely 100% wrong. I think Jesus is pretty smart. I think he set us up to be pretty good, pretty successful in our lives, right? I think the way he made us and did things that he says, you know what? Here's what you can do with your life. When I'm doing all my teachings and all this instructions and doing all these things, I want you to be challenged to do some self-improvement. Always evaluate yourself. See where it is that you can grow and develop, because I always want to lead you to different places that you've never been before. And I want to build you up and make you stronger. And so we're constantly in this process of learning and growing and seeing these new things. Yeah, we got to confront all of our baggage, but God can help us through all that stuff. Doesn't take it away. He helps us do things even in spite of all that junk. But then he says, here's your responsibility with other people. You got to just do one thing. You know what that one thing is? Curly knows it. Y'all didn't see that movie. Thank you. There's one. All you got to do is love people. Don't worry about that judging thing. Don't worry about analyzing their life and going, ooh, mercy. Let that stuff go. It's not your job. Respect people. Who? Just we like? All people. Love them. Care about them. Tend to them. Build them up. Lift them up. When they're down, rest them up. Hey, let's go back in the game. Support them. Encourage them. It's all about lifting up. It's not about tearing down. It's not about pinpointing people's issues, because every time we point, my grandfather used to tell me this, every time you point at somebody, you got 3 more fingers pointing back at you. If you spot it in people, guess what? You got it. That's what you know. If you see people talking about other people, they're just telling on themselves. Think about that. All we have to do, folks, is respond out of the same grace that God responds out of you. That's our relationship with others. If it tears people down, if you say things about folks that aren't there, drop it. Get rid of it. Throw it away. If you hear people do it, straighten them up. Start building people up. There's no good that comes out of that. Zero. It kills churches. It kills our faith. It kills our very souls. Because all we have to do, folks, is number 4. In everything, do to others as you would have them do to you. Why is that so hard? Why is that so hard? Because our feelings get involved, right? I don't know who made those feelings things, but that's kind of messes things up sometimes. It does. You know, there's a big difference between treating others the way we would like to be treated and our tendency to want to treat people the way we think they deserve to be treated. Anybody do that? Well, I can't treat them that way. They don't deserve it. You see what they did to me? See what they did to my sister? Or, my favorite, I'm going to treat other people the way they treated me. Revenge is a powerful thing, isn't it? And so we're asked to do something different than the bottom 2. We're supposed to do the top 2. So let me ask you this one question. You're a people of God. You're a people of faith. We're here to build our relationship with God, to be stronger, to be who God needs us to be. You tell me which of these 3 takes a bigger person. Which one of these 3 is an act of maturity, an act of strong faith? Which one of these 3 reveals God's response to you? I'm hoping it's the same answer, right? The first one, yeah, let's just go ahead and say that, okay? It's in tax test. You're not going to get graded on this one. Right? Hardest thing to do. And you cannot do it if God is number 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 on your list. You make him 1, then it's hard. But very, very possible. Very possible. I have my iBible here. And I'm just thinking about the story of the people in Israel and how they were in the wilderness for all that time. And I guess Moses gave his great speech when he's dropping the kids off to college in the land promised to them by God. And he says these other words, and I think they kind of paraphrase a lot of things that we do. He says this: "So now, O Israel, what does the Lord require of you?" Ever think about that? Fear the Lord your God, to walk in all of his ways, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart, with all that soul, and keep the commandments of the Lord in your heart and his decrees that I am commanding you today, for your own well-being. I love that. For your own well-being. Sometimes we think we know what we want and what's best for us. But as the God in the movie, well, I messed that one up, didn't I? Almighty, what's his name? Bruce Almighty. When Bruce said to God and said, "I just want to give people what they need, what they want," and God said, "Since when do you people know what you want?" Bingo. So God is not just a Santa Claus, is he? He's one that knows us more than we know ourselves, and giving into this God and trying to understand that is hard. It takes patience, it takes time, it takes determination, it also takes commitment to do that. And that is our commitment to you. And that is why we're here. We're here to grow and learn. Our command from the God is, for the church, is to make disciples. Not church members, make disciples. of Jesus Christ. And so you have a card in your deal. It's a response card. If you want to take that journey, if you're ready to take that journey, you want to step out and figure out what you need to do, let's get after it, and we'll go do it. In a minute, we're going to go ahead and have our table here where people come forward to share in the meal that Christ has prepared for us. But that's a good time to kind of think about how can we respond to this God who's constantly coming to us. It's a matter of trust. And if this is a place I think you can trust. So as we get prepared for that, and the band comes up to get ready for that, let us have a word of prayer. Sometimes we feel like those people in the wilderness, God, that we just want things a little bit easier than this. We want to hear your voice. We want to see your face. We want to know face to face and nose to nose what it is we're supposed to do. And sometimes we just want to know it so we can say no. We're rebellious people. We're fickle people. But we also want things to go in the direction of your choosing. And sometimes that means we just got to give up a lot of things, and that being our own selfishness. So we gather as your children here today to worship you, to make this the best day of our week that can start us off in a new way, in a new life today and tomorrow. And we want you to surround us with your love and your hope. We want you to instill a vision in our lives that we can do things that only you can call us to do. We don't want anything magical. We don't want anything religious. We just want to be real with you and you be real with us. We just want to do things that change the world. And we know that's how you work, through us. So guide us and direct us in the ways in your past, and never forget who we are, even when we forget who you are. Be there for us always in the name of Christ. Amen.
You are my strength when I am weak. You are the treasure that I seek. You are my all in